when day is done.
It
That's
is
what I need.
good to see you all. We are going to get started. I'm going to let people in. You are in the right place if you're here for Lead with Love, Voices for a Healed Future, Healed World. We're grateful you decided to join us. We're here, Auburn Theological Seminary. I'm the dean, Reverend Dr. Patrick B. Reyes. If you haven't met me yet, it's good to see you all on here. We'll begin shortly, but before we do, a few tech reminders. Please keep your mics muted if you can. I'll unmute it when we go into our small groups following a plenary session. We'll be in plenary for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have a chance to do some breakouts and have a deeper conversation with each other. More instructions will come after the panel about that breakout space. But I want to start us with a prayer of welcome from my tradition. So posture yourself and however you do for prayer. I wanted to remind us to slow down. We are on ancestor time. Remember to take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Another deep breath in and a deep breath out. This is a prayer of welcome. We give thanks for those who have gathered from the direction where the sun rises. We look to you each morning with hope, joy, love, and gratitude that the sun comes up yet again. We celebrate those gathered from the south, from La Frontera to where the sand kisses the ocean. We are reminded you are making and remaking home where you are. To those from the northern winds, from the plains to the lakes, you remind us we are connected even across broken land. And for those from the land of dusk, you bring the gift of wisdom from the redwoods, whose roots are interconnected, intermingled around a mother, standing tall and resisting fire. You have watched generations pass below you. And finally, we give thanks to those who travel with their ancestors and their descendants. People in diaspora, displaced, dispossessed. May we find sanctuary here for this moment with our beloved relatives. We are grateful you have joined us here with Auburn Theological Seminary, and I'm going to turn it over to our president, Reverend Dr. Emma Jordan-Simpson.
Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see your faces. And I have been looking forward to this evening and the opportunity to breathe together. There's something very precious and very hopeful about gathering with people, being reminded of our humanity and taking advantage of the opportunity, particularly in times like this, to breathe together. So yes, my name is Emma Jordan-Simpson, and I am the president of Auburn Theological Seminary. And before I go any further, I want to offer my gratitude to each and every single one of you for joining us tonight, and to share my hope and prayer for you these 12 days before this election, this national election. And I don't think I'm saying anything to you that you don't already know, but I'm going to say it anyway, that the algorithms of social media are designed in a way to stoke our rage. And the more that we engage with certain content, the more it makes our heart race. And the more it makes us breathe heavy, and the more it makes us feel hopeless and helpless and disconnected and disoriented. And so I'm going to encourage you to find opportunities to get off social media, to get with your community, to breathe together, to speak of your hope, and to build each other's courage. So that's my executive privilege that I'm taking tonight to encourage you to get with your community, get off of social media, don't interact with the posts that are designed to make your blood boil and your breathing labored, and get with your community. Auburn Theological Seminary is a 10-generation institution. Our history goes back 10 generations. That means that um, we were founded in an era when indigenous peoples and African descended peoples and women were not even considered to be fully human in this country. Uh, that's our history 10 generations ago, but we are living into this call to cast a vision 10 generations forward toward a healed future. Our mission is to identify and strengthen leaders from the pulpit to the public square, to do some very specific things, to build community, to bridge divides, to pursue justice, and to heal the world. And we are leaning into that call. This year we've been on a healing centered leadership journey ourselves, working with more than 50 emerging leaders, seeding the ground to build a critical mass of healing centered leaders to send into the future, leaders who are grounded in their traditions now, and leaders that we will be sending into the future. And our own work has been about grasping the roots of our institution, and working to transform and heal our own roots. And the wonderful thing, the wonderful thing is, as we work to transform the world, we are transforming ourselves. And as we work to transform ourselves, we are offering a better invitation to the world to be transformed, doing this together. The truth of the matter is, friends, that none of us, no one, not one among us, has not breathed in the toxic and enduring fumes from the genocidal violence that started this country. Not one of us has not been changed. Not one of us has not been harmed by the hydra-headed isms that are born of that kind of violence. It lives in us, and we need to heal. Our country needs to heal. We need to heal. The world needs to heal. And if we're on this journey together, it is wholly and absolutely possible for that to happen. So tonight we have an opportunity to just have a conversation. We have some wonderful friends who have joined us, who will be in conversation with us. And I'm going to have each one of them individually to introduce themselves when we call on them. But tonight I am joined by the Reverend Dr. Brandon Harris, Associate Dean of Religious Life at University of Southern California. I'm joined by Allie Rice, Deputy Director of the Boston Workers Circle. I am joined by Anthony Cruz Pantojas, a humanist chaplain and coordinator of Africana spirituality at Tufts University, and me, Emma Jordan-Simpson, president of Auburn Theological Seminary. And we have some interesting questions that we are putting on the table. We are urging you to exercise your right and responsibility to vote, to engage in the electoral process. But we didn't come here tonight to debate the worth of presidential candidates. We came tonight to talk about the hope for a healed future.
Mm.
And what we do on November 5th is critically important. But we will, God willing, wake up on November 6th, and the prospect of of needing a healed world will still be the same. Additionally, we're coming up on a very interesting anniversary, 250 years since 1776. I don't know what to call that, quite frankly. Anniversary, commemoration, like I don't know what to call it, but 250 years since 1776. And what's the prospect of healing for this country? But whatever, November 6th depends more on who you and I decide we are and who we decide we will be, and how we imagine a future that we must share, one of sufficiency and one of human safety, and one that depends on our ability to lead from hope and not from our wounds. And so the question that I want to start us off with tonight, these big questions that we're trying to tackle, is what can a healed future look like for all of our children? What can a healed future look like for all of our children? And we're going to, however you want to come with that. And I hope for those of you who all are listening that you're writing down the questions as well, because you'll have an opportunity to talk about it in your small groups too. What can a healed future look like for all of our children?
Thank you so much, Emma, for that question. For me, I've been reflecting on this concept actually that I'm translating from Paulo Freire and adapting for my own and calling it critical consciousness. And what this concept for me elucidates is the consciousness that the world does not end with us.
Mm.
And that instead we have labor in love towards an awareness, as you're pointing us to, of legacy, of power building, in that power challenging the ecologies and conditions that once dehumanized us, that alienated us, that produced systems of violence. And if we are speaking in a future orientation, then what a healed future look for me is experiencing and living into that reimagined ecosystem where freedom making has been materialized.
Hmm. Hmm. The world does not end with us. I'm really grateful for that. This summer, I had an opportunity, or was it earlier this year, I had an opportunity to go hang out with the Reverend Dr. Patrick B. Reyes in New Mexico. And I had the opportunity to see a mountain range, and they were describing to me this mountain range. Now, I'm coming from Brooklyn, New York, the city of concrete and tall skyscrapers. And I'm in New Mexico, and I see a mountain range. And I'm told that this mountain range, that people 8,000 years ago went to this mountain range to get minerals for tools. And when she continued in the explanation of this mountain range, I lost her right there, because all I could think, all I could hear was 8,000 years ago, people were coming to this mountain range and sitting there, watching that beautiful, looking at that beautiful horizon. What I thought was that the world doesn't begin with me. I am not the center of the world. You lose that when you're in looking in skyscrapers and, looking out in the city of concrete. You forget that, no, it's not the competition to be the best. It is an understanding that the world didn't begin with me.
Mm.
And you're saying, and the world does not end
Mm.
with
Mm.
us either.
Mm. Mm. Thank you, Emma, for the opportunity to be with you all today. I'm thinking of sitting at the feet of my grandfather, an immigrant to this nation who immigrated here the day after his high school graduation from the Bahamas. And he quoted his grandmother, who said, "Our family motto is to make each generation one better."
Mm.
Um, and and uh, and how my grandfather reminded us that we had a duty and a responsibility to ensure that the future was better for every generation coming after us. Um, and so I keep thinking about, how do we, in the words of the hymn, sing a new world into being? How are we singing a song and imagining a world for our children where um, they aren't going to bed hungry at night, where they have access to quality and free public education, right? Where they have access to being the freest and most joyful version of themselves, in a world that does not limit them based on all of the isms that hold us down. And so, um, I try to think about, how do we, the power of imagination is that we don't have to limit ourselves, and we don't have to limit what the world could be for them. But it's a stretch. It's a goal. It's a vista that we can actually access, though. Dreams can become reality. And so I think that's something that I've been thinking about. How do we um, make the world better for each generation, and how do we sing a new song of possibility, right? That they're not just these dreams that are beyond our capability, but that we use our gifts and our resources and our time and our votes and our presence to ensure that the world is a more beautiful place for each generation.
Mhm. Amen. You're singing my tune there. To sing a new world into being. Ali, what are you thinking?
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I'm thinking about what it would feel like to live in a healed world in the future for myself, for our children and children's children, and all of the generations forward. And I think that there's this idea, I feel like has been circling around my brain, of preciousness, and the idea that we actually, as human beings, for the most part, have our own experiences of preciousness. So whether that's like holding an infant child, or hearing your favorite music, or singing in community, or laughing really, really hard till you cry. Like, we have experienced that, and met most people. I think probably every person, but I don't know, of just like this utter preciousness of your life or the life of another. And yet we don't always act from that place in our world. Like, many people, I'm sure I have lots of times when I don't act from that place of deep acknowledgement of the preciousness of ourselves, our bodies, and every person in the world. Like, I truly believe that. And I imagine that if we were in a healed world, when we are in a healed world, And that's the place that we'll be moving from. And at times when I've gone to protests, I hold a sign that says people are precious. And I'm not like a Pollyanna. I also hold other types of signs that are more direct. But that's like my worldview, is that people are precious. Every person who is oppressed and hurt and harmed right now in the world is as precious to someone as the most precious person in your life is to you.
Mhm.
And that's like a pretty heartbreaking thing to really engage with. And so it requires a lot of courage to feel that much, to feel that. But I also believe that if we move from that place, then the world will be healing, will be healed. And yet it's scary and challenging and requires a lot of us to really engage deeply with that. And I think also there's a way in which, for me, that taps into divinity, and for me, into concepts of God, and ways of relating to God. And I think it's very hard to find the words to capture what I'm describing. Preciousness is the word I use, but that feeling of, holding the newborn child, like, how do we understand that through language? I find that challenging. And I think divinity and individual relationships to God is one way that I know I can tap in, and other people can tap in, and other things too, nature, like we all have our own ways. That's what I imagine.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I wonder how big our imagination can be.
Mm. Mm.
Um, and I say that because it's not a new world. It's not a healed world if it doesn't include everybody. Like if it's just a healed world for me and mine and the people that I love and the people that I agree with and the people that I, maybe feel affinity for or identify with, and not for others, then it's not a new world. It's not we haven't subverted the world order as the Negro spirituals of my tradition, those songs taught us to subvert the whole world. It is the whole world that is in God's hand. And it's in times where, like this, in this season in this country, the seasons that we have seen before, truly polarized and politicized, negatively politicized, where it's hard to imagine a world of love, of sufficiency, of human safety, of joy, of belonging for all of us, for all children. And it requires a big imagination. And I'm wondering what are you all thinking about that? Like, does that stretch your imagination a bit, to think about all?
Thank you, Emma, for reframing even our own reflections around
Mhm,
what does a healed world look like, because I was actually struggling with it, right?
mhm,
Because we, in a way, we were framing it as something either in a past tense or a future
mhm,
tense, but what happens in the in between, right? What is that dynamic process that is unfinished?
yeah,
Because it is not for ours to keep, but is, given generation to generation. And for me, this invitation towards imagination is really evoking what I like to talk about often, and it's that practice of becoming more human. So again, it's this dynamic process that we're navigating. And in that process, how do we examine possibilities?
mhm,
And yet, while we're exploring possibilities, taking seriously a commitment towards capacious and emancipatory relationalities,
mhm,
as you were beautifully just framed for us through that, through the Negro spirituals, right? It's not just about exiting the world or coming into our own world and siloing. It's actually no, how are we reaching across and through difference? How are we listening for that deeper call to relationality, right? That is at the same time stretching us.
Mhm.
And I think
We're
that
rewarded.
stretch,
They're,
sorry?
we're not rewarded to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think for me in that stretching, what that does is really bring up a question that I've been grappling with around um, how am I defining center?
Hmm. Hmm.
And how is the center of my world being challenged? Because
Hmm.
we don't fully see, we don't fully perceive everything, right? So again, how are we reconfiguring and recasting our worlds
Hmm.
constantly?
Hmm.
I am thinking quite a bit about your reminder that the healed world is for all. And I think in the contentiousness of the political season and the world we live in, it's how do we expand our concept of all outside of our own silo or out of our own lenses and enter into different spaces and worlds. But I think children teach us that, right? Like watching children on the playground engage with one another, right? Watching their curiosity and their willingness to build relationships or enter into new spaces. Even young adults in my work with college students, in the midst of all that was going on our campuses last year, watching my students from every cultural background from around the world, building relationships across difference in the middle of a very tense time on our campus. And yet they were dancing to Beyonce and passing out chicken to each other and plates of fried rice and entering into each other's worlds with a sense of humility and curiosity. And I think that's the lesson, that if we're going to have a healed world for all, our imagination has to begin with our own willingness to enter into a different narrative and into a different story, and into a different background. And maybe it's hard for us to imagine that because we haven't entered into a different space or a different viewpoint. Um, but yeah, I could go on, but I think that's where what I'm wrestling with and thinking about.
I think that's a something that we need to know how to do. To yearn to do it, but also to be skilled at doing it, of entering into another story, into another's story, into another narrative, from another vantage point in this era where we are rewarded for our certainty and not for, yeah, we're rewarded for what it is that we absolutely are sure about, right? And not about the questions and curiosities that we have about each other. The questions and curiosities, I think, that are the only way we get to know each other. We get to see each other, is to bring that kind of like curiosity and willingness to step into, to hear and to witness and to step into a story, to get to know, not just the people that we love, but our neighbors.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think I'm also thinking about like learnings from Adrienne Marie Brown, who's like a writer and just amazing person in the world, about how everything small can also be big. Like everything little that we do can be replicated, and like that the models that we create in our lives, while they can feel small, can also become bigger and bigger and bigger. And like, I think it's very easy for me to think like, oh, if I do this small thing, it's just a small thing, it'll just impact the people in my life. But just seeing how that can actually ripple out into bigger and bigger waves, I think is a way that I sort of can imagine this world in a different way, and without it feeling so overwhelming. It's not like, oh, I have to go, speak on a huge stage in front of 500 people, or whatever. It's not on me in that way. And I think also in Jewish, tradition, like we have Shabbat, which is a day of rest. And some people talk about Shabbat as sort of a little piece of Olam Haba, which is the world to come. And this idea that we get to actually try it out once a week for a full day. We can try out the world to come full of peace and rest and connection. We put down our phones, we don't drive our cars, like all of these things that are possible. And so to me, that also feels like the same thing of like a small thing can become large, like we can try something. And though the world, has people of all different faiths, I do think all Jews, do and are welcome to participate in this practice, in this religious practice of Shabbat. And I know that, Sabbath of many types exists across other faiths as well. And so I think like seeing the models for those things, those different ways of living that exist now is what brings me a lot of hope, and actually being able to live in that future already.
Mhm. Mhm. I have adopted a practice the last decade or so that has helped my imagination for the future.
Mm.
And I needed a practice because whew, when you live with trauma in your bones and legacies and stories of just generational trauma, um, and all of the attending whack-a-mole issues that have to do with oppression, it is so easy for that to become the focus, for survival to become the focus, and the work to be about surviving, that there is no work to um, live, to experience joy, to create, to live into the artistry. And so I adopted this practice some time ago of imagining the laughter of children. I know I look a little weird sometimes in some of these places when I hear children laughing, because I'm going to stop and listen deeply. I want to drink in the sound of children laughing. Because when I imagine children laughing, I close my eyes. You don't know who those children are. You don't know what race, you don't know, sometimes you don't know gender, sometimes when the voices change, you do. But you don't know, you don't know. All you know is that something is going right in their world that creates space for the expression of a joy, the expression of laughter. And what that practice does is help my imagination then live into how I live my day, how I live my days. So I'm not using words like I am an abolitionist, but that's the truth of the matter, because what I'm trying to do is to see that reality come to pass. And every day, there are decisions that you make every day that have to do with creating a world where children are laughing. There are things that you don't do. There are things that you decide to do. There are connections that you make, relationships that you build, the ways in which you witness. And all of that, for me, is in service to the imagination, my imagination, my ability to imagine a world that is characterized by children laughing. And notice, I'm not talking about perfection, right? I'm talking about joy. I'm talking about that which heals, that which has wounded us. So the second question we're going to put on our circle before we turn it over for small groups is, so imagine 10 election cycles into the future, or 10 generations into the future, whichever one is comfortable for you. How do we heal our future before and beyond election outcomes, recognizing that the work to repair and heal is all of our work, not just the work of those who've been wounded or the work of the marginalized. It is the work that we all must engage in if we're
Mm.
ever to have the hope of
Mm.
that kind of that world.
Mm.
What's your imagination for that, and what do we got to do? Who we got to be?
Mm. Mm.
I mean, what your question is evoking, first and foremost, is just the recognition that I have generations echoing through me. And if that is true for me, then that means that love is a stance
Mm. Mm.
of freedom, of interdependence that keeps making me return,
Mm,
because it serves as a reminder that this particular practice is an ethic.
mhm,
It's robust, it's care, it's an understanding that through this ethic of love, we're illuminating possibilities. And hear me, I'm not talking about a romanticized pleasantry, sentimentalism. I'm talking about the endeavor of our work to humanize each other, to enter into our inner and outer worlds, which requires vulnerability, that requires for us to recognize that we live in the interstitial, in those small spaces
mhm,
that are calling us to live. And in that living and in that practice of love, then we continually do the work of listening.
mhm, mhm,
And that demands an inquiry, a state of reality that we need to deepen relationships.
mm,
It's not just an act of the mind, it's not just philosophies, it's not just citing theologians and our favorite literature, poet, or whatever, right?
mhm,
It's I am called into relationality. And that relationality evokes opening our experiences, those that are beautiful, those that have been harmful,
yeah.
doing the work of repair to change our social conditions and to realize a world where we can all flourish.
Mm. And making vulnerability, listening, relationality. 10 generations,
Mm.
which is important because we didn't just get here.
Yeah.
As we've said, this is the long horizon of a way of life,
Mm.
a way of life that has the potential to heal us and the planet. Anybody else want to take a stab at that?
I'm thinking a question out of my own tradition that was posed to Jesus by a lawyer who asked Jesus to sum up the point of the law. And Jesus says, "It is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself."
Mhm.
But then the lawyer says, "Well, who is my neighbor?" And my hope is 10 generations from now or 10 election cycles from now, the question is not who is my neighbor, but how can my neighbor flourish? Because I know my neighbor. Um, and so that's my hope, very, very simply, is that we will get to know our neighbors. And because we know our neighbors, we're concerned about their flourishing and their well-being and their thriving. Even not even just 10 generations from now, but going into a few weeks from now, I want to think about who is my neighbor
Mhm.
and what does it take for them to thrive.
Mm. Amen. Amen. That's a good question. That's a good question to add to our imagined midrash. around that question with Jesus. Who's my neighbor? How can my neighbor flourish? Or what did he say? He said, you have heard it said, but I say unto you. That'll be our generation's approach. You have heard it said, who is my neighbor? But I say unto you, how can my neighbor flourish? We just made that up, y'all. Oh,
I'll share one final, just short thought, which is that when I think about 10 generations forward, I think about being an ancestor myself, and it makes me emotional to think about that. And then it makes me ask questions like, how do I want to live so that I can be someone to look back upon and feel proud of? And I hold my ancestor right here, my great grandmother Rose, whose name I carry. And yeah, I want to live for that vision.
mhm. To be an ancestor.
Mm.
Friends, we have been talking with the Reverend Dr. Brandon Harris. I'm introducing them now because they didn't introduce themselves, right? So we've been talking with the Reverend Dr. Brandon Harris, the Associate Dean of Religious Life at the University of Southern California, where he serves a diverse office of 90 religious and spiritual organizations and oversees the Trojan Church at USC. He also serves as co-pastor of the Park Hills Community Church, Reformed Church in America, which is an affiliate. He also serves as an affiliate of the USC Center for Religious and Civic Culture. And Brandon, I am so grateful for you and for your work. Allie Rice, the Deputy Director of the Boston Workers Circle, is also a fundraiser, a matchmaker. We had that conversation. A community organizer working to build independent and just community spaces. The Boston Worker Circle is a Boston area secular social justice Jewish community. Before she was there, she was at Join for Justice, a Jewish organizing training institute, and at Ryan Immigrant Center and Refuge Point, both immigration and refugee focused nonprofits. She loves matchmaking, braiding, Havdalah. Did I pronounce it right? Candles, group singing. Okay, Brandon. Group singing. We'll have a choir here. Running a community garden in her little yard and spending time with her family and friends. And our deep friend here, Anthony Cruz Pantojas, who is the humanist chaplain and coordinator of Africana spirituality at Tufts University. He supports the exploration and development of ethical inquiry and the sacred through co-constructed projects with the campus community. He's worked to increase the visibility and impact of the humanist chaplaincy and humanism at large. As an endorsed humanist, celebrant, and chaplain by the Humanist Society, a board certified chaplain, a certified spiritual director through Still Harbor. Their praxis centers Afro-Caribbean humanist and free thought philosophies, promotes critical thinking and discovery, and inspires individuals to do what we've done here tonight, which is to question and reimagine their inner and outer worlds. And I hope that this conversation has been rich for you and a way for you to enter into your own small group conversations. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick.
What's going on, everybody? I hope you can hear me. Just to say thank you to Brandon, Anthony, Allie, who all have been through our Emerging Leaders program this last year. And you can tell why they're here, because they are the spirit of a generation that hopefully will heal this world, because I'm tired. I'm just joking. We're grateful. We're so grateful for the gifts that they bring into the space. And Thank you to our president, Reverend Dr. Emma Jordan-Simpson, for hosting a beautiful conversation. We want to make sure that you have time to meet the great people. I know many of you on this, on the call who are sitting in that have been listening, but we want to give you time to engage and dream yourselves. So we're going to spend about 20 minutes in small groups. I'll open up the rooms and open up the microphones so that way you can talk and meet. The questions are simple. We want you to introduce yourself, who you are, where you're at, and answer that question. What does a healed future look like? It can be relationality like Anthony offered. It could be who is my neighbor, and what does it take for them to flourish like Brandon offered. And Allie, you and I are on the same wavelength here. Like, what does it mean to be a good ancestor? How do we do this work well? So I'm going to open up the rooms. If you have any questions, I'll be back here in the large group or in the large room, but have great conversations for about 20 minutes. Stick with it. The people are amazing. I hope you meet some incredible human beings for the next 20 minutes or so. So you'll see yourself kicked to a small group. Have a great discussion.